Thank you very much, guys. It's wonderful to be here. What a great turnout. And I want to thank Dean and Janet for their venue. They're great hosts. I've stayed with them before, and I'm looking forward to doing so again. And it's great to see a lot of faces here that I know. You know, I go around all around this state, and I meet more people in Florida than I know in Christchurch. I honestly do. Seriously, everywhere I go. So, and it's great to meet Victoria too. I've corresponded by email. She lives in Dunedin, which is in the southern part of New Zealand. I live in Christchurch. Christchurch is English, Dunedin is Scottish. Dunedin's still standing. Christchurch is half on the ground with the earthquakes, but I'm here in this country because, well, for a lot of reasons really. I'll say, look, a lot of people ask me why I should even care about the politics of your country. And there are two basic reasons for it. The first is simple gratitude. My country is only free because of the sacrifice of your fathers and grandfathers and uncles in the battles of Guadalcanal and Coral Sea and Midway during World War II. And there's a huge debt of gratitude for that. And the other reason is related, but it's a little bit more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. You know, you're right. A freedom should fail in the United States if you lose your military superiority and your world leadership. The bad guys of this world, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, the Cubans, the Nicaraguans, and all their crazy allies will carve up this globe amongst themselves. Now, a lot of people, they write to me and they say, you know, well, New Zealanders, we're very cocky too, because we're way down in the South Pacific. We think nobody's ever going to bother us. But 1,500 miles to the north of New Zealand lie the Fijian Islands. Beautiful place, now has a Marxist government. The Chinese are training the Fijian military and building big hydroelectric dams on the islands. Fiji is now a Chinese client state. And that's happening right through the Pacific. Just a few months ago, the Australian Defence Minister was up in China for talks, and a top Chinese defence official publicly embarrassed him. He said, now is the time for Australia to choose. Do you stay under American protection or do you come under Chinese protection? And that is the kind of protection that Tony Soprano would offer you. Seriously, folks. That would not have happened under Reagan or under Bush, probably not even under Clinton. But it's happening now because the bad guys of the world are getting bolder and bolder because of the leadership coming out of your White House. I will tell you, your allies from Israel to Britain to Australia to Taiwan to Japan, to Korea, are all freaking out because they see that your president loves the bad guys more than he loves them. And that is creating huge instability all around the world. It is creating a shift in the global balance of power, and if it carries on, it will lead to war. There is nothing else it can lead to. The man cries peace, he is leading your country and the globe to war. So I want to start tonight really talking about what I call the central secret of communism. Now we all know that communism's gone and we don't have to worry about it. Okay? But somebody didn't tell people in the White House. The central secret of communism, and it's never written about, hardly ever discussed, it's not atom bomb spies or Occupy rock throwers. It is the ability of a tiny Marxist-Leninist party to get their policies implemented as the law of the land in their country. So how could that happen? These groups are only a few hundred or a few thousand strong. How could they possibly influence public policy in a country of 10 million or 150 million voters? How could they do that? Well, I want to give some examples, and I'm going to start with one from New Zealand. Back in 1984, my country elected a socialist Labour government. And one of the first things they did was to enact legislation banning nuclear warships from our harbours. And as you guys were the only people sending nuclear warships to our harbours, overnight that killed the Australia, New Zealand, United States military alliance, ANZUS, killed it stone cold dead. And it has still not been revived to this day. So how could a pro-Western, American-loving country like New Zealand, who'd been saved by you guys only a few decades before, how at the height of the Cold War could we so willingly turn our backs on the Western Alliance? How could it happen? Well, this is how it was done. A few years after that, I had the privilege of interviewing over several months a New Zealander who had infiltrated our local Communist Party for our security intelligence services, the equivalent of your FBI. So he was a secret government spy inside the Communist Party. And he worked his way up through the ranks, and in 1983 he was given the greatest honour any communist could enjoy. He was sent to Moscow to train at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning on Leningradsky Prospect. Now this was not a small place. There were 3,500 students at any one time, many of them on 7-year courses, many of them with one-to-one tutelage. This was the training academy for the future world communist leadership. And there were people there from Sri Lanka and Taiwan and Argentina and Korea and Turkey and Egypt and Tunisia and Canada and Mexico and Jamaica. Virtually every single country of the globe was represented except for one, the main enemy itself, the United States of America. So why were no Americans training there in Moscow? Because at some point your government had told the Soviets that were any Americans ever caught training there, there would be war. And the Soviets respected that. But what they would do, they would train Canadians or Mexicans or New Zealanders in the doctrines they wanted promoted, then those people would go and train the American communists. So my friend sat in a little room with the KGB, the other 3 members of his delegation, and the tutors from the Institute. And they had a plan. Because this was the time of the massive anti-nuclear peace marches through Europe. Hundreds of thousands of people on the march calling for the end of the nuclear umbrella over Europe, the end of NATO. And there was a real fear at the time that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, your alliance with the governments of Europe, would end. It would be all over. And the Soviets were funding these peace marches through their communist parties all throughout Europe because they wanted to destroy NATO, because that would give them a free hand in Europe. And you people need to realise that Moscow's #1 target back then and today is your military. Their #1 priority, because your military is the only thing standing between them and what they want. And what they want has never changed. So the idea was, well, we've got this big thing going on in Europe. How about we break away another country from the Western Alliance, and the impact of that will help spur on the breakup of NATO. They're very subtle. They're chess players, these guys. So they picked on New Zealand because we're small, progressive, world leaders in liberal thought, so we think. And the communists were very strong in our peace movement. They controlled our labour movement, and they had infiltrated our Labour Party, the equivalent of your Democrats. They were right in there. So the idea was this. Now, we can't sell this as an anti-American thing because New Zealanders love America. So we've got to pick another angle. So they decided to sell this as a patriotic thing. Kiwis standing up for peace. Kiwis standing against the nuclear arms race. New Zealanders striking an independent foreign policy. All very proud, patriotic stuff. So they worked out the slogans, and this small delegation went back to New Zealand. They held secret meetings with the Labour Party, with the labour unions and the peace movement. They mounted a big campaign, and in a few short months, the legislation was in front of our Parliament banning nuclear warships. It was passed, and our alliance with you guys was killed. Just like that. And I will tell you that if you ask any New Zealander today, and I'm sure Victoria can attest to this, about our anti-nuclear stand of 1984, which is still in existence, they'll puff out their chests with pride, and they'll say, yeah, we did it, we stood up for peace, we stood against the nuclear arms race, and not one New Zealander in 100,000 has any idea that those policies were designed in Moscow by the KGB. Totally, 100% duped. So could this possibly happen in the land of the home of the brave and the land of the free? Conceivable? If I told you this 5 years ago, would you believe me? Well, some of you would. Okay, I'll start with a couple of examples. I'll pick on a small symbolic example first. Out in California every year, they get a free paid day off work to celebrate the life of Cesar Chavez, Labour Union leader, founder of the United Farm Workers, trained in Chicago by the Marxist agitator Saul Alinsky. Both Hillary and Obama owe a lot to Mr. Alinsky. Worked with communists and socialists his entire life, and he marched under the famous slogan, "Se puede, yes we can." Some of you might have heard that before. And that's exactly where it came from. Obama admits that. So the woman who got that passed was a woman called Evelina Alarcon of the Cesar Chavez holiday campaign. And she got a whole bunch of left-wing movie stars, all her friends in the labour unions, and all her comrades in the California state legislature, and she got it pushed through. And now she's trying to take it nationwide. And her website still lists the endorsement for her campaign of your president himself, Mr. Obama. Now, I'm sure most Californians don't have any idea, and I'm sure Mr. Obama would never have known. But Evelina Alarcon is the leader of the Southern California Communist Party USA. But she has done that in California, and she wants to do it nationwide. But what about a bigger example, a real meaty one that's going to affect every single person here? Stands to socialise between 1/6 and 1/4 of your economy. Guess what that might be? Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act. What a joke. And as Victoria, I'll keep going back to Victoria, she's probably seen socialised healthcare in New Zealand. I'll tell you what, you do not want it. Unless you want to wait 4 years for a knee replacement or something like that. So, the father, and I acknowledge that Obamacare is not yet fully socialised healthcare. It's not single payer. But we all know where it's going to go if it's allowed to stand. And it cannot be allowed to stand. The father of the single-payer healthcare movement in this country is a man called Quentin Young, a retired physician out of Chicago. He's pushing 90 now, but he's been hammering on this idea since the 1950s. He set up numerous groups, numerous doctors' alliances, worked with state legislators all over this country,